Welcome back to the Kaspa Silver YouTube channel. In today's video, I want to answer the question, how would Kaspa be considered a currency if the price is so volatile? I'm answering this question because this was proposed by a user in one of my previous videos. And I think the best way to answer this question is to first get some context and actually understand the currencies that we use today. Now, I think it's a misconception to believe that the current currency that we use today, and in the example I'll be giving is the US dollar, is by any means stable. There is really no such thing as a stable currency. And in fact, all currencies experience volatility. Now, the problem is we can't really see this because we have been conditioned to understand that the US dollar is the world reserve currency and everything is based in the US dollar terms. But if we're looking at the purchasing power of the US dollar, it's actually down over 96% in the last 100 years or so. And this mainly all started getting worse when the US dollar got off of the Gold Standard Act and started criminalizing the possession of gold, because then this meant that the US dollar, when it used to be backed by gold, every time someone had $1, there needed to be an equivalent amount in gold. Well, eventually countries started realizing that the US would be possibly printing more dollars than there was gold, so these countries started asking for their gold back, and ultimately the US did not have the gold to back up the amount of paper money that was in existence. So this means that the US decided to get off the Gold Standard Act, and now the US lives on debt and printing money infinitely. And then you can see that quantitative easing started in response to a financial crisis back in '08, and ever since then, pretty much the way to solve financial crises are to print money in the US. And you could see that this recent crisis in 2020, about 3.8 trillion US dollars were printed in 2020, which is equivalent to about 20% of all the dollars ever created. And so if we're looking at the chart for that, you could see that over time, this is how the chart looks for US dollar being printed. Now, when we're looking at a currency like Kaspa or Bitcoin, and I'm going to stick to currencies that are actually trying to become a currency and have technology that's based on proof of work and how the money supply for them are capped, we can take a look at Kaspa, and this chart does not look like the Kaspa chart for the supply of how much Kaspa will ever exist. You could see that there's a rapid emission schedule in the very beginning, but then eventually it will just steady off and no longer increase. This is what makes these type of cryptocurrencies very valuable, because they have a max supply. This max supply creates a currency that actually experiences deflation instead of inflation every single year, because every single month, when we're talking about Kaspa, there's less amount of Kaspa that gets created. And if we're looking at something like Bitcoin, every 4 years, there's a less amount of Bitcoin being created. And today we can see that Kaspa, if we're looking at the emission schedule, today is January 2nd of 2024, and you can actually see here that on the 6th of this month, the emission schedule is going to have another decrease in the block reward to reduce the inflation amount of how much Kaspa is going into circulation, and this will continue happening every single month until it reaches its cap at about 28.5 billion Kaspa. Today, there's about 76% of the supply already mined, and the rest of the supply is going to be mined within the next 10 years or so. So ultimately, new Kaspa is created by miners. Those miners receive the Kaspa as a reward because these miners are securing the network. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin if you're looking at that cryptocurrency as well. So how in the world would a currency work for something that is volatile like Kaspa? Well, I already explained that ultimately all currencies are volatile, and we're just already conditioned to accept the fact that I'm using my US dollar and inflation happens every year, and we're conditioned to believe that it needs to stay at least 2%, and then some years it goes way more. And this question over here where he proposes, if one day ice cream is 3 Kaspa and then another day ice cream is 4 Kaspa, how is that going to work in the economy? Well, the same way today, if I go to the store or to get some fast food, some days for some reason the fast food goes up like $1, and then another day it's less than $1, and it's not always the same exact price. And the thing is, we have the mindset of US dollars, and ultimately Kaspa for sure won't be adopted in the sense of a currency in the US, because currently the US dollar is still viewed as this global reserve asset. Everyone looks at pricing for things in US dollar terms. If you go to CoinMarketCap, all the pricing is in US dollar terms. But you have to realize that Kaspa is a global currency. It's not just for the US. So for people like us, for me in the US, it's hard to imagine or think that Kaspa can become a currency. But if you believe that the way the economy is going in the US isn't the best way and how to maintain this purchasing power of the US dollar, which is always declining, and that it's only going to get worse, you would realize that Kaspa for a US investor is more of a store of value, because there is actual cap supply for Kaspa in the future, so that you don't have to worry that there's going to be an infinite amount of Kaspa being printed, which will devalue your purchasing power. But there are countries in the world that suffer with their currencies being completely devalued, that it is more important to be holding a currency like Kaspa or Bitcoin. For example, if we're looking at the Argentinian peso, you could see that it's worth about 0.0012 in terms of US dollars. And if we're looking at the max chart for this, it's completely just basically gone to zero in US dollar terms. But if we're looking at what this is worth in Bitcoin terms, in Bitcoin, Argentina pesos are worth about 36 million Argentinian pesos for just one Bitcoin. And you can see that this recently happened. This is the chart, the Bitcoin chart in terms of Argentinian pesos. So if you were holding Bitcoin in Argentina, this is actually a better currency for you. And people will say, well, oh, like, why would I sell it if I know it's going to go up or whatever? But at the end of the day, when you're living in a country, you need to have necessities, and your currency isn't able to buy those necessities, you're going to willingly want to probably sell this or try to find someone who would accept Bitcoin to actually get your necessities. So it would basically work the same way. And it all really does come down to adoption. Adoption doesn't happen overnight, and the crypto market as a whole is still very early in its stages, and there's still a lot to be seen to be adopted as an actual currency. But in the time being, there are different ways to still use it as a currency, which right now is mainly by selling the currency as Kaspa. So we can't really imagine that Kaspa is going to get adopted as a currency. For anyone trying to propose that this is going to happen within like the next decade, I don't really think that's the case. In other words, there's gonna be different countries that may allow this. And if we go to this website here, you can see that there's crypto tax-free countries where there's no tax on spending your crypto. And one country that comes to mind is El Salvador. You can actually go there, use your cryptocurrency as payment for goods and services. The biggest problem with this using crypto as payment for goods and services are taxes. And as long as taxes are around, this idea that Kaspa can become a currency globally will probably never happen, but it could happen in different countries. For people like us in the US, currently the only way to avoid taxes on spending our Kaspa, if we wanted to use it like at a store, would be making sure we hold it for at least 1 year, and then also making sure that you are keeping your income below a certain amount of money. So it says if you sell cryptocurrency and profit, you owe capital gains on that profit just as you would on a share of stock. If you use cryptocurrency to buy goods and services, you owe taxes on the increased value. So anyone telling you that Bitcoin is going to become a currency or anything like that, really, it's just not going to happen anytime soon. But as long as the US economy continues to decline, I believe that the US dollar will continue to lose its purchasing power. These currencies are going to be a good hedge against that in the future, things like Bitcoin and Kaspa. And those are really the only ones that I look at in the terms of their use case, which is store value, medium of exchange, and all that kind of stuff. But Bitcoin is solely just a store value, and Kaspa is more of a store value, medium of exchange, and a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, because the fees are very, very low on Kaspa, which encourages people to use it. The supply for Kaspa is a lot more higher, so it discourages people to think that it's so scarce that you should just never use it. And at the end of the day, when you need necessities in those countries that actually have devaluing currencies, they're going to use Kaspa for getting those necessities. And whether that is by selling it or actually using it in peer-to-peer, that still counts as transactions on the blockchain, which means that there is adoption happening. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is another way that we can maybe see Kaspa be used as a currency, and this would involve smart contracts. Because with smart contracts, you can make a stablecoin that's pegged to a certain currency, and then you can end up using that stablecoin instead, and that means that you can stay within the network of Kaspa, but still have more stable type of prices so that it's not really volatile. And I think this would be a very, very good way to make sure you can still stay in the network of Kaspa, but still have some Kaspa to use for payment. So I could buy Kaspa, send it to a stable coin that's pegged to the US dollar in the future, and then make sure that if I'm going to spend any Kaspa, I'm spending that stable coin Kaspa, so that I don't have to worry about any gains that I might have gotten from that money that's been put there. But if we're going into a world where the US dollar is maybe not the number one currency, then it would be very wise to have Kaspa or Bitcoin or any of these currencies that are actually trying to do the currency part of crypto. Now, smart contracts are not on Kaspa, but this is because they're trying to build the best base layer for smart contracts to work on. If we're looking at something like USDT, this is right now showing the fees for USDT transfers, and the cost of transfer on ETH is about $1.29. BSC is about 3 cents. Tron is about $1 to 93 cents to maybe 95 cents, and then Polygon is 3 cents. Now, the problem with this is, one, the values here are just raw estimates, and this is very true. I use Tron USDT a lot, and right now the fees every time I use it is at least $3, which is absolutely horrible. And if we're looking at something like Ethereum, Ethereum is not even viewed as a currency. It's more just viewed as a smart contract platform, and everyone hates Ethereum fees. And then if we're looking at Polygon, it's the same thing. It's not encouraged to be used as a daily currency or to be viewed as money. It's again a solution to solve Ethereum fees by doing things on Polygon instead. Same with BSC. BSC is a heavily allocated coin to Binance. About 50% of the supply is given to Binance, and the rest was given to the public. So it's these other forms of stablecoins are not the best. They're built on horrible networks. And this is why Kaspa is tapping into a market that has yet to be seen, because it's remaining proof of work. It's keeping to the roots of decentralization and the roots of how Bitcoin was built, but it's trying to build the best base layer to ever exist in proof of work to become the standard of how these cryptocurrencies should be built from now on forward. And in the future, if a stablecoin gets built on Kaspa, you can see Kaspa basically becoming its own economy, especially with a stablecoin that has basically feeless transactions, would allow people to adopt it and use it, which would then generate more fees for miners in the future. So at the end of the day, how would Kaspa be used as a currency if the price is volatile and all that kind of stuff? It does come down to adoption. As adoption continues coming into the crypto space, the volatility continues to get lower and lower. And if you understand economics and the fact that the US dollar is always losing value, then things like Bitcoin or Kaspa will forever gain in value because there's basically no top. If the US dollar continues to lose value, then that means these currencies will gain value because their supplies are capped. There's only so many that can ever exist, and things like Bitcoin and Kaspa. So their values will always increase. And then after that, it depends on the technology to actually encourage users to use the network instead of just hoard it. Like Bitcoin is more encouraged to just hoard it, and Kaspa is building the best base layer so that people can actually use it. So the adoption for using Kaspa as a currency is coming. Just recently, not too long ago, the official Kaspa YouTube channel was showcasing how Kaspa was getting accepted in Kenya, and this person made a transaction with this person buying some goods and services. You can also go to the Kaspa homepage and go to merchants and actually see all the public companies and stores that are actually accepting Kaspa for payment. Just recently as well, we have payment systems that are accepting Kaspa like CoinPal, non-payments, and cryptocurrency checkout. These things allow the integration for Kaspa for online stores to become easier. So there is work to Kaspa getting accepted in different countries and be used as an actual currency. But the real issue is we have to get our minds out of the US dollar. And if you live in the US, it's hard to ever view Kaspa as like an actual alternative currency because it's not getting adopted like that here. But just remember, Kaspa is a global currency. It's not just for the US, it's not just for one country, it's for the world. And there's going to be other places that could definitely use Kaspa as this form of payment. So just keep that in mind. And I hope this kind of answers the question and gives you some more background and context about the viewing Kaspa as a currency in the future. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. And as always, don't be average, be different.